The air was cold and full of dust as Jake stepped into the dark tunnel, with only a weak light on his helmet. The rocks around him were sharp and broken. The ground was shaking just a little with each step he took, but he kept going deeper into the earth below the mining station on planet Corgus 5. He was alone in this tunnel. The rest of the team stayed back after the tremor broke the support beams. They said the tunnel was too dangerous to explore, but Jake had heard something strange and soft like a whisper from under the rock, and he could not forget the sound. It was not like a machine or echo. It sounded like someone was crying. He stopped and listened again. Nothing but silence. He took another step, then another, and finally, he heard it again, a soft voice crying, weak and broken. It was coming from under his feet, not far from the last collapse. Jake dropped to his knees and brushed away the loose rocks. His fingers found a metal edge. He pulled harder and uncovered a hidden hatch. The hatch had no lock, only strange symbols that glowed faintly. He touched one, and the hatch slid open with a low hum inside. It was a small space, not much bigger than a closet, and there she was, an alien girl. Her skin was a pale blue, and her hair looked like thin silver threads. Her body was curled up, shaking, and weak. Her arms were wrapped around her belly, which was round and glowing faintly. She was pregnant. Her eyes opened slowly when she saw him. She did not scream or move. She only looked at him with tired fear, and then she whispered one word in English, "Please." Jake felt something in his chest, something that said this was not a trap. This was real. This girl was in pain, and no one else had heard her cry. He reached out his hand slowly, but she flinched and pulled back. He sat down near the hatch and placed his helmet on the ground, letting her see his face. His eyes showed no threat, only concern. He spoke softly, asking who she was, what happened, but she could only speak in pieces, strange words, mixed with pain. Then the tunnel shook again, but this time it was not from rocks moving. It was something else. A sound, a growl, deep and low, like it came from something alive, something big and close. The girl's eyes went wide. She grabbed his arm tight and pointed to the dark behind her. She whispered fast, in fear, "It is coming back." Jake looked into the black tunnel behind the hatch and felt a cold fear run through him. He saw nothing, but the sound grew louder, slow, heavy steps and deep breathing. He helped the girl out of the hatch and into a narrow side tunnel where they could hide. She moved slowly, her body weak and heavy from the pregnancy. She leaned on him as they crawled into the vent. The noise passed by them, but it did not stop. The beast, whatever it was, sniffed the air and paused near the hatch. Jake held his breath. The girl buried her face in his chest, her body shaking harder. After a long moment, the steps moved away. The sound faded into the distance, and silence returned, but it was not peace. The girl whispered again in broken words, "It will come back. It always comes back." Jake looked at her more closely now. Her face was young, but full of pain. Her arms had marks like she had been tied or trapped, and her eyes were red from crying. He asked her again what happened, and she told him a little. Her name was Erlane. She was taken from her ship by something not human, not natural. It was part machine, part beast. It used her and left her here alone to give birth. Jake felt anger rise in him. He had heard stories of alien labs, deep underground places where things were made and hidden away, but he never thought he would find one with a living girl inside. He told her he would not leave her. He would take her up to the surface and find help, but she shook her head fast. "No, they will not help. They will kill me and the child." The light in her belly glowed brighter. The child inside moved, and Jake saw the fear in her face turn to something else. Not just fear, but also hope. She looked at him and said one thing clearly, "You came. You heard me. No one else did." He nodded slowly and said, "Yes, I heard you, and I am not leaving." But even as he spoke, he knew the danger was not over. The beast was still out there, and someone had made it. Someone who did not want this girl or her child to be saved. Dawn, deep in the shadows behind them, something moved. Again, watching, waiting, asterisk. The small vent tunnel was dark and tight. Jake moved with slow care, holding Errol close. Her breathing was fast and weak. Her skin was colder than before, and the light in her belly now pulsed with short flashes like a warning. They stopped in a small metal chamber that looked like an old storage pod, long forgotten. He helped her lie down on a soft spot made from his jacket. She closed her eyes, but her hands stayed locked on his wrist, as if she feared he would vanish. Jake checked the tunnel again. The sound of the beast was gone, but the memory was fresh. The way it moved, the way it breathed. It was not just an animal. It was something made with purpose. Its steps were heavy, but its senses were sharp. It did not roar or charge. It stalked. He thought about how it had paused near the hatch, sniffed the air, and then left. It could have found them. It should have, but it did not. Wirelane opened her eyes again and tried to speak more. Her voice was dry, and her words slow. The beast did not kill her, because it was ordered not to. She was captured by force, taken from her ship by enemy raiders who used machines to twist nature into weapons. Jake asked if the beast was one of them. She nodded. It was made in a lab, a mix of alien DNA and something else. It was not born, it was built to breed fear and control, built to conquer without a war. She was meant to be a message to her people, a royal captive, carrying a child made by monsters to break her line and shame her blood. Jake sat down, silent for a moment, then said he was sorry that no one came for her. She looked at him with sad eyes, and said one did. She told him she had been down here for weeks, maybe more. Her body was kept alive by machines that had now failed. She had cried for help every day, but no one ever came until now. He wanted to bring her to the surface, to the medical team, but she stopped him. Her kind were not known here. If the colony found her, they would report her to Earth Command, and she would be taken again, maybe worse than before. Jake understood too well how Earth Command dealt with unknown alien life. They feared what they could not study or control. He promised her again that he would find another way. Suddenly, a sharp sound echoed in the tunnel. A metal pipe fell from above. Jake moved to block the door, his pulse racing, but nothing came still. He knew it was not just wind or luck. Something was watching them, something that did not forget. Caroline whispered about the other girls, the ones who were taken before her. She had heard their cries too, in her first days of capture. But slowly the voices faded. She had not seen them again. Jake stared at the dark vent beyond the door, and knew this place was deeper than anyone thought, not just rock and gas, but hidden rooms and secrets from long ago, maybe even before the colony was built. He decided to go back to the surface, to steal supplies they needed: water, food, medical tools, and heat. But first he needed to make sure Caroline was safe while he was gone. He gave her a small flare from his belt, and showed her how to light it. If danger came, she must light it, and crawl to the tunnel corner. He would come back no matter what. She held the flare close, like it was gold, and nodded with quiet trust. Jake crawled through the narrow paths, moving fast and silent. He reached the mining shaft door and climbed to the edge of the surface, where no guards stood. At that hour he slipped into the storage bay, took what he needed, and left a fake log to hide his tracks, then returned down into the dark, where no light reached. He got back to the pod. Caroline was still there, but her eyes were wide, her body tense. She pointed to the door and whispered again. It came back, but it did not enter. It looked at me and it left. Jake felt a strange twist in his chest. The beast had come close and seen her, but turned away again. Was it trained to obey someone, or did it know something else, something about the child? He sat beside her and gave her water. She drank slow and rested her head against the wall. Her hand moved to her belly and she smiled weakly. She said he moved. The child was strong. Jake placed his hand on the light, and for the first time, he felt it, a small kick, soft but real life, that had no blame for its birth. He knew then that this was no longer just a rescue. It was something more. The girl, the child, the truth behind the beast, all of it was part of a larger plan. Someone above ground wanted that plan to stay buried, but Jake had already chosen his side. Jake did not sleep that night. He sat near the pod door, his hand holding a mining knife, and his ears listening for any sound. The tunnel was silent, but it felt wrong too. Silent, too still, like something was holding its breath just outside there. Caroline was resting now, her body weak but safe. Her hand never left her stomach, where the soft glow of the unborn child still pulsed like a tiny star inside her. The light was brighter tonight, more steady, more alive. Jake could see it even with her cloak wrapped around her. He needed help, but not from the colony, not from the officers who would only ask questions and call for backup. He needed someone who would listen without judgment, someone who still believed that not all aliens were enemies and not all rules were right. So at first light, Jake left Caroline again, this time locking the pod from the inside and setting a signal beacon on his helmet. He climbed up fast, using forgotten shafts and quiet doors, until he reached the old hangar where his friend Mason worked alone. Mason was an engineer, older than most, with scars from the last space war, and eyes that had seen too much. Jake trusted him more than anyone. When Mason saw Jake covered in dust and carrying stolen tools, he raised a brow and said, "What mess did you crawl into now?" Jake told him everything, not just the tunnel or the hatch or the beast, but about the girl, the child, and the way the creature had come and gone without harm. Mason listened without a word until Jake finished. Then he leaned back, crossed his arms, and laughed. "Sure, you did not hit your head down there. You want me to believe there is a pregnant alien girl hiding in the old shaft, and some monster guard dog just lets you walk away?" Jake looked him in the eyes and said, "I saw it. I helped her. I am not lying." Mason stopped smiling. His voice turned cold. "You know what they do to people who hide alien bioforms, right? They do not ask questions. They just send a black team and clean up." Jake nodded slowly and said, "I know, but if you saw her, if you saw the way she cried and thanked me, if you saw the light in her belly, you would understand." Mason stood up and walked to the door for a moment. Jake thought he was going to report him, but instead Mason locked the hangar from the inside. and turned back. "All right, show me, but if this is a trap, I will break your jaw myself." They moved fast through old tunnels and emergency shafts until they reached the pod. Jake knocked the secret code twice, and the door opened slowly. Sat up when she saw them, her eyes going wide with fear, until Jake stepped in first and said he was not alone. Mason froze when he saw her, his face pale, his mouth open. He dropped his bag and took one step back. She looked too human, too fragile, and too real to be a lie. He whispered under his breath, "She is real." Araline nodded and spoke in a soft voice, "Not from here, but from deep inside her." She told him, "Thank you for not shouting, thank you for seeing me." Explained her story again, but Mason said one thing. "I do not get why would the beast leave her, if it was made to protect or control or harm." Jake said maybe it knows the child, maybe it feels something, maybe the machine part of it follows orders, but the part that is alive is confused. Mason shook his head and sat down. He stared at the girl for a long time, then said, "I believe you, but we cannot tell anyone." "Not yet," Jake asked. "Why not? They could get help." "Real help," Mason replied, "because someone is already watching you, maybe more than one. I saw the logs this morning. Someone checked your tracker. They know you went below, but they let it happen. That means they are waiting for something, maybe even her." Jake looked at Araline, her eyes full of fear. Again her hand shaking, she whispered again, "The labs. The ones who took me, they are not far. They watch from shadows. They make the beasts and they feed them too." Mason cursed and said, "We need to move her, not just hide her. If they find this place, we are all dead." Jake asked where to go. Mason said there is one place, the frozen vents near the dead lava tubes. No one goes there, too cold, too deep and too old, but they will never look there. They packed fast, taking what they could carry. Mason showed a hidden path under the metal floor, and told Jake to take her first. He would follow and erase their trail before leaving. Jake turned to Araline and said, "We will keep you safe. I swear." She smiled weakly and replied, "You already did more than anyone has." They crawled into the vent. The tunnel behind them lit up with a red light. Someone was coming. Jake held her close and moved faster, deeper into the dark, as the first silent footstep echoed behind them. The cold in the lava vents was sharp like broken glass in the air. Jake held Araline close as they moved through the frozen tunnel. Her body was shaking harder than before, her breath was light, and her lips had no color. The glow in her belly had faded to a dim flicker, but the child was still moving, still alive. Mason had sealed the entrance behind them using an old blast door and a fake rock panel. No one would find it easy, but Jake knew time was running short. He could feel it in the air like a storm waiting to fall. Stopped in a small cave, carved long ago by hot gas, and forgotten now by everyone. Jake spread out thermal blankets from Mason's bag and lit a low heat lamp. Araline lay down slowly, her eyes closing for just a moment before she opened them again. In pain, Jake gave her water and pressed a med patch to her arm. It would help a little, but not enough. She needed real care and time and safety, and they had none of those. She looked up at the cave ceiling where cracks let a thin line of sky show. Through her voice was weak but clear, she said, "Look, the stars are moving." Jake followed her gaze. At first he saw nothing, then he saw them, thin lights moving across the black sky. "Too many, too fast. Not meteors, but ships," she whispered. "They found me." Stomach turned cold, not from the air, but from fear. He had hoped they would have more time, but now the sky itself was falling. Mason's voice came through the old unit broken with static. "They are landing near Zone 7, not colony ships, sleek design, silent engines, maybe scouts from her side." Jake asked what they wanted. Mason said, "Not sure, maybe her, maybe the child, maybe both, but they did not look friendly." Araline said, "They are not here to help, they are here to erase." Jake looked at her and said, "Then we need to move again." But she shook her head. "The child is coming too soon. We cannot run anymore." Knelt beside her and said, "Then we make a stand here. No more running, no more hiding." She took his hand and placed it on her belly. The glow inside was brighter again, warm and pulsing with slow rhythm. She said, "He is strong like you." Jake looked at her and said, "I am no soldier. I am just a miner." She smiled and replied, "Then I am just a broken princess." Outside the cave something moved. A soft sound like sand shifting, but deeper, heavier. Jake grabbed his blade and stepped toward the cave mouth. The figure that appeared was tall, wrapped in gray armor with no face, only a smooth black plate where eyes should be. It held no weapon, but it did not need one. Its voice came out flat and cold. "Subject located, authorization confirmed, retrieval begins." Jake stood between the figure and Araline, his blade raised. The figure did not move, did not speak, just watched. Then Araline cried out, her hand clutching her stomach. Jake turned to her, but she waved him away. "The child is coming now," she said with pain in her voice. Jake turned back and said, "You will not take her." The figure replied, "Step aside, or be removed." Jake did not move. The figure raised one hand, but before it could act, a flash of light exploded in the sky, above the cave, and a second ship landed hard, sending dust and ice into the air. Another figure stepped out, this one in white and gold armor, with the royal crest of Errol. People, her cousin, her voice sharp and full of fire. You will not touch her. The first figure paused, scanned her, and lowered its hand. Unit override detected. Standing down. Jake looked from one to the other. Erlane tried to sit up, but her body was too weak. Her cousin walked into the cave slowly, with cold eyes, and said, You broke every law of our kind, and still you live. Erlane answered, with a weak laugh, I did not die, so yes, I live. Her cousin looked at Jake, and then the glow in Erlane's belly. Then she said, The child must be destroyed. It is not pure. It is not allowed. Jake stepped forward and said, You will not touch them. Clisson looked at him and said, You are not part of this world or this war. You are just a human. Jake replied, Then let me be the first human to say no to you. For a moment, no one moved. Then Erlane screamed and light poured from her body. Her cousin stepped back as the air around them shook. The child was coming. Now Jake dropped to her side, holding her hand. Her grip like iron, her breath sharp. The cave filled with light and sound, and life, then silency. Child was there in Jake's arms, small, glowing eyes open with calm, not fear, not pain, just peace. Erlane smiled once and whispered his name. Jake looked up and saw her cousin frozen, not in anger but in awe. Child looked at her, and reached out. The stars above stopped moving. The baby lay in Jake's arms, warm and quiet, his tiny hand curled around Jake's finger. The glow in his skin was gentle, like the light of a moon, calm and alive. The air in the cave had changed. No more fear, no more cold, just stillness, like the universe was holding its breath. Erlane rested against the wall, her eyes tired but shining. She whispered, He is safe. Now he is born. The hard part is. Dunjik looked at her and smiled, but he knew it was not true. The hard part was just beginning. Outside the cave, more ships were landing, fast and silent, the kind that did not bring peace. Her cousin stood still, her white armor glowing under the cave light, her eyes locked on the child, her face unreadable. Jake did not trust her, not yet, not with how she had spoken before, not with how she had wanted the child. Gonchi stepped forward and reached out one hand. Not to take the child, but to touch his cheek. The baby looked at her, and did not cry, did not move. Just stared with those strange new eyes, half human, half something older. She said, This is not what I expected. Jake replied, None of this was. She turned to Erlane and said, The High Council will not accept him. They will send judgment, not forgiveness. Erlane whispered, Then let them come. The cousin looked at Jake again and said, You cannot protect him. We are trained for war. You are just a minor. Jake said, Then train me. I will fight with you, or without you. She paused, then turned away, speaking into her comlink, sending a silent message. Jake could not hear. Mason's voice came through Jake's old com, broken but urgent. Jake, they are coming from the east. Scanners picked up 6 more ships. Not her kind, not ours. You need to move now. Jake looked at Erlane. She shook her head. Slow, I cannot run again, and he should not have too. Jake handed the child to her, and stood up, gripping his blade tighter. The cousin watched him, and asked, You are serious? Jake nodded. If they want war, I will give it to them. She opened her armor and pulled out a second weapon, a thin spear that hummed with power. She tossed it to him and said, Then, do not miss. The sky outside turned red as the enemy ships landed without sound. Metal claws dug into the frozen ground, and figures stepped out, not beasts, not soldiers, something in between, tall with armored skin and long limbs. They moved like machines, but smelled like death. Jake stepped out first, alone into the wind. The creatures saw him and paused, maybe confused, maybe amused. A human standing with nothing but a blade. One of them spoke in a voice like rust. He is nothing. End him. Jake ran forward, not with skill, but with fire. He struck the first one low, then rolled away. His blade sparked as it hit armor, but it cut deep enough. The creature fell with a sound like steam. The others moved faster, but not smart. They thought he would fall easy, but Jake had learned from tunnels, from falling rocks and broken drills. He knew how to move, where to strike, and how to fight dirty behind him. The cousin joined the fight, her spear dancing like light. She moved with grace, cutting 2 enemies down before they could even swing. Mason arrived with a stolen turret from the outpost, dragging it through ice and setting it near the cave door. He yelled, Cover me, and opened fire. Blue beams lit the snow as more enemies dropped inside the cave. Erlane sang, not with words, but with sound, her voice low and deep, the child in her arms glowing brighter with each note. Her song moved through the wind, touched the hearts of those who heard it. One enemy stopped mid-attack, its blade shaking in its hand, before it dropped and fell to its knees, as if something had reminded it of what it once was. Jake saw it and knew. This was not just war. This was truth fighting lies. This was hope standing against fear. They pushed forward step by step, inch by inch, until only one enemy remained, a leader, tall and cloaked in black, its eyes burning red. It looked at the child, and spoke, "That thing is a mistake. It should not live." Jake stood in its path, his blade broken, his body bleeding, and said, "Then, come take him." The leader charged fast, strong. Jake closed his eyes, ready to fall, but before the strike landed, the child cried out, not with fear, but with power. The cave exploded with light. The enemy screamed and vanished like smoke in sun. When the light faded, Jake was still standing, the cave was still whole, and the child was asleep. Again, in Erlane's arms, her cousin walked up slowly and said, "Maybe this child is not a curse. Maybe he is." The answer: Jake looked at the stars and whispered, "Then let them come." Asterisk. Snow fell slowly outside the broken cave, glowing in the soft light of the child's skin. Jake sat near the fire, watching the small body wrapped in silver cloth. The boy's eyes were closed, his tiny chest rising steady, calm, safe for now. Erlane leaned back against the stone wall, her hair wet with sweat, her face pale but proud. The birth had taken much from her, more than anyone saw, but she was still awake, still holding on, because of him, because of the child, because of Jake. Mason stood at the cave mouth, holding the turret gun, silent. Now, after the last wave, he looked up at the sky, watching for more ships, more danger, more reasons to stay afraid. But for the first time in days, nothing came near Erlane's cousin walked in her white armor, now stained with black dust, her spear in hand, her face unreadable. She looked at Erlane, then at the child, then at Jake, and said, "The stars are quiet, too quiet." Jake stood up, slow, his back stiff with pain, his legs heavy from the fight, but his hands steady. He said, "Maybe they are waiting, maybe they saw what happened, and do not know what to do next." The cousin shook her head. "They do not stop. For fear they stop to plan. The real storm has not come yet. This was just the edge." Jake nodded and sat back down beside Erlane. He reached out and touched the child's small hand. It was warm and firm, full of life, a life born in dirt and stone. But reaching for stars, Erlane whispered his name. It was a word Jake could not say, a sound that had no meaning in human tongue, but felt like wind and light and fire. She said it again, and smiled. "He is not just mine, he is all of us." Mason came over and sat beside them. He looked at the child, then at Jake, and said, "You think Earth will accept him?" Jake did not answer. He knew the truth. Earth would never accept something like this. Not now, not yet, maybe never, he said. "We do not tell Earth, not yet. We tell no one, until he is strong, until he can choose his own name, his own side." The cousin did not argue. She only watched the fire for a long time, then said, "We need to move again. This cave is not safe. We need a place no one knows, a place forgotten by stars and maps." Jake said, "Do you know one?" She nodded. "There is a station under the old ridge, not on any chart. It was built during the first wave of colonization, long abandoned, now dead and cold, but it still has air and heat, and shields." Mason stood up and said, "Then we go now, before anyone else finds us." Jake helped Erlane stand. She held the child close, as if part of her heart lived outside her body now. Maybe it did, maybe it always had. They packed fast, leaving nothing behind except the burned bodies of enemies, and the broken light of the past. They walked through ice, and wind, through tunnels, and cracked ground, through silence that felt too big for words. The hidden station was real, just as the cousin said, a giant dome under rock and ice. Its doors sealed but not locked. Jake forced them open with Mason's help. Old lights blinked to life, with a low hum, and warm air greeted them like breath from an old friend. Inside the station, they found clean rooms, metal beds, working power, and thick walls. No one had been here in decades, maybe longer. The perfect place to hide, the perfect place to grow. They made a room for Erlane, soft and warm, with white light above, and quiet walls around. They placed the child in a cradle made from Mason's old pack and lined with silver cloths. He slept without fear, his face peaceful, as if he knew nothing of the blood or pain that brought him hither. Cousin brought food made from rations and alien seed cakes. She sat beside Erlane, and for the first time they spoke without anger. They talked about the past, about stars and war, about choices made in fear, and about a future not yet broken. Jake walked the station alone, checking each hallway, each shadow, each whisper of the past. He found old maps, old messages, old dreams left behind by those who once lived here. He found a journal on a desk left by a man who died alone. It said, "Hope is not born in light. It is born in dark. It grows where no one looks, and blooms when no one believes." Jake closed the journal and looked back at the cradle, at the boy who had no name, and every name, the boy who came from stars, and was born in dirt. Outside, the wind blew hard, but inside there was warmth, inside there was breath and heart and light, inside there was life. The station under the ice had become a home, not by comfort or design, but by choice, by need, by fire and fight. Arlene slept in the quiet room with the child beside her, the soft glow of his body still warm against the cold metal walls, his tiny breaths steady like a song that never ends. Jake walked the outer hall, his boots silent, his eyes alert. Every corner was checked, every light fixed, every lock tested. He knew they were not safe forever. Nothing that lived was safe forever, but they had bought time, and that was enough for now. Masan worked in the old control room, turning broken tech into traps, silent alarms, motion sensors made from scrap. He smiled as he worked, but behind the smile was a mind planning every way to hold the station even if they were found again. The cousin trained alone in the upper dome, her spear slicing air with perfect form. She did not speak often, but when she looked at the child, her eyes changed softer, more aware, as if something old had broken, and something new was starting to grow. One morning the stars above blinked out for a moment, not all of them, just a few, but it was enough to know something big had passed between light and sky. Mason checked the signal board, and said nothing at first, then called Jake with a face to calm. They sent a fleet, he said. Not scouts, not hunters. This is a council ship, high command. Royal Crest. These are the ones who never come unless something sacred is at risk. Jake looked at the sky from the surface hatch. He saw the great ship break through the clouds, slow and quiet like a shadow that forgot it was night. It had no weapons out, no fighters in front, just one long ship, older than time, smooth, like bone and deep gray, like silence. The cousin stood behind him, her voice low. They came for him not to kill, but to decide what he is, and if he can be allowed to exist. Jake asked what they would do if the answer was no. She said they would erase us. All they gathered in the great room. Arlene held the child close, her hands firm, but shaking. The cousin stood at her side, and Jake stood before them, with Mason checking the doors. One last team up. Soft hum filled the air, and from the main gate stepped 3 figures, tall, quiet, wrapped in light. Their eyes like stars, their robes silver and still. They said nothing for a long time. Then the one in the center spoke. We are here for truth. We are here for judgment. They asked to see the child, and Arlene stepped forward, holding him out, not with fear, but with pride. He is mine, she said, and his father is this man. She pointed to Jack. The council looked at Jake, then back at the child. One of them raised a hand, and the air shimmered, not with heat, but with memory. They saw it all. The cave, the beast, the fight, the light, the cry. They saw what the child saw, what Jake saw, what Arlene felt. They saw the birth of something new, and when it ended, the room was quiet again. The center figure spoke. He is not a threat. He is not a weapon. He is a bridge. Of the others said, but a bridge can fall if no one walks. If Jake stepped forward and said, then, I will walk it. I will raise him. I will protect him. I will teach him to stand, not for one kind, but for all. The council looked at him, and for a long time said nothing. Then they turned to Arlene and said, your blood was meant for rule. Now it may be meant for change. Are you ready? She said. I was not before, but I am now. The council stepped back and said, then, the child may live, may grow, may speak one day for more than stars, may speak for peace. They had left without sound, their ship vanishing into sky, leaving behind only the wind. Jake sat down near the cradle and looked at the child. He was awake now, his eyes wide, his hand reaching up toward the light above. Arlene sat beside him and said, he will never be only yours or mine. He will belong to everyone. Jake smiled and said, then we better show him how to be strong. Mason laughed from the hall and said, and maybe teach him not to chew wires first. They all laughed for the first time in many days, not because danger was gone, but because they were still standing, because they had made it. Through the cousin stood apart, watching the stars, her hand on her weapon still, but her heart a little less heavy. In the cradle, the child closed his eyes and slept under the watch of stars that had once judged him. Now they watched something new, something brave, something born between dirt and stars, something human and more